Thank you.
Thank you, Carola. It's interesting because where I live and reside, where I've lived for 50 years, I understand something about divided communities trying to live together. And it's interesting when I look at the proposal of this bill. And what I struggle with is someone who has lived through a charged environment, sometimes very toxic environment, is that public perception is often key to these discussions. And I know as someone who has lived in Northern Ireland through a difficult time that actually the message that was portrayed often wider globally was not what I experienced on the ground. So you have to be careful about the message that you're getting out of an area like this. One man's occupied territory is another man's homeland. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And one man's act of aggression is an act of self-defence. And I think we need to be cognizant of this, because no one in this building today understands truly the complexity of this discussion. We can't attribute blame to one side or the other in this discussion. All involved must be accountable. And we must fully understand what the objectives are with this bill. In my opinion, the objectives would be to protect the Palestinian people and to leave or change an attitude to this long-running issue and to get a resolution. I work part of my time in a university structure. Universities, as many in the room know today, are judged by output and impact. And I would ask the question what the output and what the impact would be of this bill. I'm not convinced that the desired outcomes would be delivered by the bill. The Good Friday Agreement demonstrated the value of dialogue and talking, and even though that's a long-running, very slow, very tedious process, it's the only process that will deliver results. Ireland's role, in my opinion, is as an independent state, and it should be to support and facilitate dialogue and to facilitate conflict resolution in the area. In my opinion, this bill, if enacted, would be applicable to many territories around the planet, and I don't think that's going to happen. So I would oppose this bill, and I would support the government in their position of facilitating dialogue and support. Embargoes and such like issues would probably create more problems than it would resolve.
I appreciate it. I understand Senator Riley, Senator Feehan, you're sharing time, and Senator Mahoney, you're sharing the 8 minutes.
Yes.
5.
Yes, I propose
4, 2 and 2.
2 and 2.
Is that agreed?
With Senator Feehan.
Thank you kindly.
And thank you for your facilitation. At the outset, to briefly welcome An Seanad and salute and express our appreciation for his real engagement with this issue. I don't think anyone in the House is disputing that. And indeed, again, to commend Senator Black on bringing forward the legislation and the bill. I suppose, in essence, there's not a person in this House, and very few people outside of it in this country, who support, or who even support is the wrong word, who in any way countenance the settlements. They're a horror to all of us. They are illegal, they are immoral, and they are just wrong on every front. I mean, just to give the discrimination with the supply of water, with energy, 40% unemployment in Gaza, the list goes on, and it's a horror and it's wrong, and there's no ambiguity about that. We're unequivocally of that view. That's the Taoiseach's view, that's every member of the House's view. I'm sure that's the view of the great majority of the people outside this House. And that's we're all unambiguously clear about. It's also a horror that 130 Palestinians have been killed over the last number of weeks during the protests, and that's been deemed by the UN, the Israeli reaction, to be excessive there. So all of that is the case. The question before the House is how to respond to that, and what is the proportionate and wise response. And the advice, so the horror of it, we're not a question about, and we could all speak for an hour on that, and I would actually like to have spoke much more graphically around that. But the question presented today is, do we take the Taoiseach's advice based on his experience, based on his experience internationally, based on his AG's advice, but very specifically, more importantly in this context today, based on his advice having dealt with the question and been on a number of times in the Middle East and interacting with colleagues within the EU, at all levels. His advice, our Taoiseach's advice here, is to hold off on this because he sees, the impact has been minimal and the moral authority diminished, and the opportunity for Ireland to politically impact on the situation as a small neutral state, diminished by something that won't have a proportionate effect in the other sense. And he is also, so that's the question really, which is the more impactful, that we go on as a state, a neutral state with moral authority, with a tradition of the respect for the human being, for freedom, for independence, for justice. That we go on progressing and working strenuously in that way, or that we in some way, by doing this, on the Taoiseach's advice, put ourselves out of that frame in the same kind of role, in the same kind of moral authority role, politically impactful role. And coupled with that, of course, is the legal advice, which doesn't need further elucidation. It's coming from the AG, but the real issue, I think, is the first one. And so, essentially, my view is that the House, and I would appeal to my good friend and colleague Senator Black in this instance, I know she did it before and she showed great maturity and great political cop on in taking the Taoiseach's advice to wait then, and I know it's hard to do it twice, but I personally think that it's not lightly done, and that maybe the more impactful thing, to make the comment, to make the protest, but to see, can we diplomatically deal with the question and keep it under review. My colleagues have two other specific points they want to get made, so I don't see it. That's in essence the question.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Mahoney.
Thanks, Cahill, and I just want to acknowledge, if you like, the deep passion that everybody on all sides of this debate have spoken with here today, including the Minister. And I suppose the question is, it has been referred earlier, what we want to do, we're unified in the need to improve the position and the conditions of the Palestinian people. That's the first thing. The question is, can it be done by continued diplomacy on the work by Ireland as a country and by the Taoiseach leading that? And obviously the passion that you displayed today in the way that you want to do that, as well as all of the other arguments, have been absolutely impressive to me. I hadn't intended speaking at all. But I suppose the question I have to ask, and I thank Senator Riley for letting me in for just a couple of minutes, can we keep both avenues on the table? And I know it was postponed since January, but I really would appeal here. And I'd ask the Minister as well, this isn't trying to kick anything down the road or anything else. I would ask the Minister, you know, is there a possibility of some tangible progress in the coming months, we'll say by September or October? And if there isn't, then that this statement be made by this House. I have absolutely no problem with that at that stage and would support it. But I would like if the Minister could give some assurance that that there is a possibility of progress in the next few months, and then ask both sides to keep both avenues on the table, and that we can get to an end, because, you know, as Senator Mitchell said, dialogue at the end of the day solves most problems.
First of all, I want to say that the Government has a very clear and strong position on illegal settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. And this Government is completely opposed to the construction of settlements and has consistently condemned their expansion. And on an emotional level, the bill today has a strong appeal, and I do respect the motives of those supporting it. But the Minister has made it clear that the Government does not support boycotts in Israel, believing such actions would be ineffective and counterproductive. And those who agree with views on the resolution of the conflict, as well as potentially isolating Israelis from the kind of interactions where diverse views on these issues are expressed. Successive Ministers for Foreign Affairs have also taken this view. And I conclude, taking the bill forward, I believe, would isolate Ireland in terms of dialogue. And the Government believes Ireland would find it much more difficult to maintain dialogue, which currently gives opportunities to raising these very difficult issues and to press for action towards peace. Some may dismiss this dialogue, but ultimately, how are we to achieve peace in the Middle East and Palestine?
Thank you very much, Senator. Now, could I have Senator Lawler for a couple of minutes, please?
I actually don't mind foregoing my time to allow other people to speak.
And
I've spoken on this issue on
I
a
really
number of
appreciate
occasions.
that, Senator.
I'm actually torn by this whole bill. Do I see the benefit of the bill to the Palestinians? Do I see extra water coming to the Palestinian farmers on the West Bank? Do I see extra economical support coming from Arab states around the Middle East coming to the Palestinians from this bill? I doubt very much. Israeli opinion does not, or the Israeli government does not worry about world opinion. It just worries about its own objectives.